Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp. I am so glad to be with you. Tonight, we are asking this pesky question. Are we living in Babylon the Great? Now, some people think that America is Babylon. Could it be? Well, it could be. I mean, I see a lot of parallels, but then again, a lot of people think that, maybe New York City is, or Rome is Babylon, or they think that any number of places could be Babylon. So we're going to take a deep dive tonight. We're going to look at this whole topic of Babylon. We're going to start way back in the beginning, and we're going to come forward and say, okay, maybe this or that or something else is Babylon. So if this is something that's been on your mind, get ready. Here we go. Let's get into it. Joel is going to kick it off for us. Hey, Joel, Scott.
Hello.
Great to see you guys. Yeah, don't look so excited, Scott. It's okay. Yeah, I know.
Some people like hiccuping right now, and it's very painful. So
somebody took him out skiing.
Well, it was his big idea. He's like, "Let's go," and I was like, "Okay." And so we had a great time. But no, we had a really fun time. We went 2 days to Keystone, 1 day to Vail, and if you've never been to Vail, yeah, it's like nothing on earth. It's pretty crazy. So,
did you ski or snowboard?
Well, I did the respectable thing, which is to ski.
Okay.
And my friend did the other thing, so which shall not be named. So, he kind of landed with a thud on his rib. So
right on my face.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Joel, take it away. Kind of tell us what's going on here. Is America Babylon? I'm dying to know here.
So, the point is that there is a physical Babylon over in the Middle East. It's obviously it's important in the Bible. It's everywhere. But then there's these weird references throughout the Bible to, is it Babylon? Is God talking about specifically the leader of Babylon? Is it Nebuchadnezzar? Is it somebody else? And things like that. And so really what we want to do is realize that there is a physical Babylon, and we know that it's between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Then there's also possibly a spiritual Babylon. There's a daughter of Babylon. There seems to be maybe some other type of a Babylon. There might be 4 or 5. You never know. So we'll discuss it tonight. The reason why I wanted to bring it up tonight is because people are asking this. They're starting to post information. Joe DeMond, who has given us a few of these slides, and I'll cite him, don't worry. He brought up a couple of things, and then a guy named Mike, and he declined to be on the show, but he brought up an interesting couple of verses that I have to share with you, and I'll lead out with those. So Mike is saying this particular verse, and keep in mind the passages that matter the most are Jeremiah 50 and 51, and then Revelation 17 and 18. These are big judgment time frames. And 17 and 18 occur after, if you're a literalist in terms of linear lines on Revelation, then it would occur after the bowls, and Babylon would be judged. Whatever, it's judged at some point in time. So let's run through this. This is a key verse, or a couple of verses here from Jeremiah 51. The sea has flooded. Babel overwhelmed her with its raging waves. Her cities have become desolate, parched, arid land, a land where no one lives. Nobody even passes through, which is accurate about physical Babylon in the Middle East. I will punish Bel in Babel. So that is the god, and Doug will explain more about that in a minute, and make him disgorge what he has swallowed. The nations will no longer flow to him. Babel's wall will fall. Get out of her, my people. And you'll see that also in Revelation. Each one save yourself from Adonai's fierce anger. And that's Jeremiah 51, 42 through 45. Doug, if you would explain how the seas have flooded Babel, the original Babylon, because that's a problem with this section. There's no seas nearby Babylon.
That's a great point. I mean, to be fair, that is a great point. Let me ask you though. Okay, if America is Babylon, then how is it that nobody is dwelling there? I'm really curious about that.
And that's the tough thing with prophecy. That's why I'm not dogmatic on this. Yeah. A couple of people brought it up to me, and it was interesting, but I don't know where to go with this, because as I read, say, Luke 21, you're talking about physical Jerusalem in 30 Common Era, say, and you're coming to 70 Common Era because we're going to have some bad things that occur. But then there's this quick movement towards today,
Yeah.
and so maybe that's occurring in these verses. I don't know.
Well, so what I guess what I would do, I try to take things as literally as possible, unless it's just completely stupid. Unless it's just obviously a metaphor, all kinds of stuff. The sun's coming out of her bridal chambers. I mean,
Sure.
or, it's like, well, okay, so that's probably not quite literal in that sense, right? There's obviously some figurative speech that's going on here. In this case, God has so many, just what's the right word? So much wrath against Babylon that I tend to take it a bit more literally. All right. So when I kind of think of what started back with Nimrod, right? He established Erech, Akkad, Babel, right? That's a big one, right? And then Babel literally means the gate of the gods, Bab El. It's the gate of the gods. And when they were building the Tower of Babel, no, they were not trying to touch the dome, just so people know. They were actually trying to create a stargate. That was the whole point. There's lots of literature on that in case people are wondering. They weren't, kind of off in their heads. But they were trying to create a stargate so that they could commune with the gods. That was the point. And the city of Babylon was supposed to be the playground of the gods. That was the basic idea. The gods were trapped behind the veil. They could not get to this side of that veil, the cosmic curtain, whatever you want to call it, the thin psychical dimensional membrane. They could not get to this side. Again, gods being the bad angels, okay? They could not get to this side except through some type of ritual, some type of mechanism. I think they were trying to create a wormhole. That's what I think they were really trying to do. And then what happened with Babel is that the city became obviously this center of this terrible false worship and these false gods. And then that got exported. Okay. That's the important part to remember. It got exported to everywhere in the whole world, right? There is not a place on earth where the influence of Babel is not felt. Kind of sort of like America. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
I know I get it. I totally get it. But that doesn't necessarily make America Babylon, right? I think it makes it America part of the problem. That's where I would just have a little caveat there. I think America is a problem. Granted, yes, 100%. But I don't think they are the origin of the problem. I don't think they're the last, gasp of the problem either. I think God has a very strong vendetta against the city, the literal city of Babylon. And here's the thing, is that when John was writing about Babylon, of course, Babylon was still in existence, right? This is kind of the thing that people often kind of forget. There was still a huge Jewish population in Babylon. Now, Babylon, the city proper, the one with its walls and all that stuff, it's sort of basically crumbled, right? So you still had a lot of suburbs of Babylon, as it were. I live in the suburbs of Denver. Do I live in Denver? Yeah. But do I really live in Denver? Well, not quite. I live pretty close. So that's kind of the idea here, but I would tell somebody that I live in Denver if I'm, in China. I'm not going to say I live in Arvada because they're like, where is that? Like Denver. Like, oh, I've heard of Denver, And so Babylon as a greater metropolis was very much still in existence. Hadrian went there, as late as the 2nd century when he conquered the area. So it was still a thriving area. That was going on. And
so let's discuss this, though. Let's go back to, we have Babylon first. So basically the Daniel 2 and the Daniel 7 dreams. And so we've got Babylon first, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, then Rome. So as we have Medo-Persia destroying Babylon, did they flood them?
When did they destroy Babylon?
They really didn't. They just walked in. They dammed up the Tigris of the Euphrates and just walked in underneath the gate.
And then Alexander came in, and guess what? He conquered Babylon without a fight for the most part. Okay. He did not lay siege to the city. The Babylonians thought he was their hero, right? He came in as a champion, as a Messiah figure, a savior who was saving them from the old decrepit ways of the Medo-Persian Empire. right?
Okay.
And that was the center of his glorious kingdom until he died at the ripe age of 33, right? So, you know, and guess what? From Babylon, then went these 4 different generals, right? And they took all of that other stuff. And so they took Babylon with them. Now, Greece already had its own problems, don't grant me, okay?
Yeah, there's some
still,
Greece being pulled out there.
yeah, they were already into Babylon as a culture. Let's be really clear about that. But they got exported again in a different way. So what I would suggest is that the Babylonian system is all around us. Okay, is it in America? Yes. Is it in Chile? Yes. Is it in Belize? Yes. Is it in China? Yes. Okay, that Babylonian system exists everywhere. It exists in India. You know, we see that the gods of Babylon were exported to all over the world. When you think about the Roman gods, you're really thinking about the Greek gods. And when you think about the Greek gods, you're really thinking about the Babylonian gods, right? That's where it all started. You know, so Ishtar became Astarte, right? Who then became Venus, and on it goes. So it all started in Babylon. So my thinking is that God still has a very strong vendetta against Babylon proper. Okay, the one is in Iraq. Okay, I think God has a real issue with that place, and that He's going to judge it. Now, you know, if you go there, you're like, well, there's nothing here. Okay, there's really nothing to talk about. And again, my defense would be that, hey, the city was never destroyed, but it rather just fell into oblivion over time. And I think that God wants to destroy it. I think that He really wants to make I hate to speak for God, but I'm just trying to do my best, taking the text and saying, this is what the kind of the feeling I get. Okay, so hey, God can do whatever He wants. But as I read the text, as I read His words, the way I interpret those is that the very city itself is going to be rebuilt. And when I was a pre-tribber, this could never happen because, boy, it all had to happen by tomorrow, and we just didn't have time for all this stuff to happen. We didn't have time for Babylon, the city, to be rebuilt. But it's amazing what has happened, and I think that China has shown us how quickly you can build cities from scratch. They've built now tons of ghost cities that are, maybe that was a bad financial choice on their part, but still they were raising buildings in 30 days. I mean, it's insane. Imagine if they just took their time and did it in 60 days, right? I mean, the kind of stuff that you can do, the Burj Khalifa, just such an incredible building, right? And all of the stuff that's going on there, in Dubai, that all happened roughly in the last 50, 60-ish years. It doesn't take generations for things to be built. But again, if we're in such a rush, we're pre-tribbers, and we're like, man, this has got to happen today, then yeah, there's never enough time for it to be built. But maybe God's timetable is not quite the way we think it is. And, maybe things are going to happen. That's my take on it. I think
You're
a
just
lot of
not
things
imminent enough, Doug. You're just not Mr. Imminent.
It doesn't sell books nearly as well, I have to admit, though.
It really doesn't. You could have been a contender.
I know. I should have stayed pre-trib, man. I really, I rethink my choice on that quite often because the money was a lot better when I was a pre-tribber. Oh, yeah. But hey, whatever.
Okay, so how about this? We have a seat of Satan on Museum Island in Berlin, Germany, and it's rather ornate, and it seems to be in disrepair lately. It was open for many, many years, but now it's been closed since, I think, 2019-ish. Okay.
I got to see that actually.
Oh, you did?
East Berlin. Yeah, that was
really
incredible. And I got to touch the actual Ishtar Gate. So I probably wasn't supposed to, but I'm like, I just got to touch it. It's too amazing.
To May over that.
Maybe that's why they closed it. Please, fingerprints are on this thing, doggone
it. So you actually saw all of that on Museum Island.
Well, I saw in East Berlin, if we're talking about the East Berlin Museum.
That is East Berlin. Yes, that's right.
Okay. I didn't know it was on an island. I just went there.
Yeah,
I must have missed the island part. But yes, it was amazing, and I was amazed by how well the Ishtar Gate was preserved. And of course, you have,
And where does
Marduk
the
all over
Ishtar
that thing, right?
where does the Ishtar Gate come from?
Well, it comes from the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right?
There
From
you go.
Nebuchadnezzar's city.
Yes.
Is that the right answer? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
that's the right answer. Yes,
Okay,
that
good.
is the right answer.
Yeah. Okay.
So the point is that we have the seed of Satan, and it's described vividly by John in Revelation 2:13, Pergamum. Now it was moved, though, in a strange way. It was moved from Asia Minor, Pergamum, up to Germany just before World War I. So it was set up and ready to go by 1901-ish, and then we had World War I by 1914.
Mhm.
And then it was dilapidated, and they had to rebuild it again, and they had it ready for 1930. And oddly enough, there are certain other things in the world that look just like that gate, and so
Mhm.
I'm arguing that I think those things came from Babylon to Asia Minor to Berlin and brought their curses with them. I believe they're cursed objects. What do you think?
I think it's entirely plausible that they could be cursed. It's hard to substantiate that or quantify that, but that there could be
World wars.
Well, I see your point. I see your point. I'm not gonna debate it. I'm just saying that, proving
And
that
the Holocaust.
is,
2 world wars
but
and a
yes,
Holocaust.
yes.
That's bad.
I agree. I agree. What can I say? I mean, we can't prove that was the reason, but could it have been the reason? Sure. I will definitely agree with that.
So is there a spirit attached to Babylon that would drive people to do world wars and to instigate violence against the Jews and the Holocaust and other things like that? Is this the spirit that, and I'm going to be arguing later on that it's not just the city, it seems to be the city nation. The city drives the nation, and I'll show you some of those verses and we'll talk about it, but it seems like there's some kind of a plague associated with Babylon and this gate of the God thing.
Yeah. Yes. On that, I'm 100% with you.
Okay.
I'm 100%. And again, I think it's very plausible that the literal artifacts, the physical artifacts, could have a curse attached to them. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I'm simply saying it's hard to prove. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
But I think your speculation is warranted, and it's probably right. We can't quantify it scientifically or whatever. But I'm with you. It makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think that stuff that God brought. Now let's be clear though. The Neo-Babylonian Empire is way later. Okay, so we're talking, the 6th century BC was kind of Nebuchadnezzar's heyday. He actually was working on the Tower of Babel. All right, if you want, I can bring up the quote. It's astounding of where he talks about how, well, actually it was his father who started working on reconstructing the Tower of Babel. And he says, my 2 sons are here with me, and my little cutie Nebuchadnezzar, he's helping me rebuild this thing, right? And then Nebuchadnezzar's like, hey, I didn't build this thing. I simply rebuilt it. It had been desolate for some 42 ages. We're not told what an age is, but
from Nimrod.
It had been desolate for a very long time, right? Yeah. So I think that is, X marks the spot, as it were. I think that is the Tower of Babel. He tried to rebuild it. He did not succeed ultimately in doing that. But, he was working on it. And, what's amazing is that God got a hold of Nebuchadnezzar. I fully expect to see Nebuchadnezzar in the kingdom, right? I mean, that's what's so amazing about this guy. But it was Nimrod. He was the bad guy who really instigated all of this false worship. Up until then, people were in rebellion to God, obviously during the flood, but there was no sense of that there are other gods. At least we're not told that in the text. Everyone seemed to have a universal knowledge of God, right? And then you had these other fallen angel demon things that were coming and doing some naughty stuff, but God's right to rule was never questioned.
Okay. So you're citing that Nebuchadnezzar stepped out and said, "Look at what I've built," and then immediately he went crazy for 7 years, and he looked like a bird, so to speak, or an animal with feathers, and ate grass and other things like that, and then suddenly he was saved again, and he admitted that God created everything. So
Yeah, that's what
okay,
I'm saying.
all right, that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe he will be in heaven. I never thought about it.
Well, he gives some pretty amazing, he's like, man, you better worship the God of Daniel. And if you don't, I'm taking you out, man.
But then they forgot that right afterwards, his son or whatever, they were celebrating and they brought out the holy items of the temple, and that was the end.
And what's new, right? I mean, basically that's what's new, right? I mean,
and Media Persia showed up within seconds, within moments of that. It's interesting, and I believe he saw in a dream that he would be able to invade that way by damming up the river. So very interesting,
indeed.
So let's move forward to the next slide, if you don't mind. Can you?
That would be you.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't know that people could see it.
Hold on. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so we're dealing with the waters, and this is an odd one. This is from John Moore. He's kind of one of the guys from the intelligence community, and he said that the U.S. Navy created a map of future America where there would be flooding, and so this is kind of taking Isaiah 24, where it seems like the earth is shuddering like a watchman's hut, where the earth seems to be a drunk, and things like that. And so there would be a sloshing effect. There's not going to be another flood, people, but there might be some sloshing as the poles seem to move. And the poles are moving right now anyway. I mean, if you talk to pilots, they'll describe that the pole was moving towards the United States, but now it's moving towards Russia. And the weather is changing in those regions too. So anyway, the map that you're seeing here, it's not that large, but it does cite from John Moore, USA Flood Map, and there are other people that claim to be prophets. This one happens to be from the Navy, which is intriguing, and it shows basically 3 regions of the United States. Now let's read the verse on the right-hand side and see what you think. The 7th one, so this is Revelation 16, this is the 7th angel pouring out the bowls, or the vials. The 7th one poured out his bowl on the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, "It is done." There were flashes of lightning, voices, peals of thunder, and there was a massive earthquake. Such has never occurred since mankind has been on earth. So violent was the earthquake. The great city, whatever that is, was split into 3 parts. The cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babel the Great. So we do have a citation to Babel. Now, is that great city? I don't know. Made her drink the wine from the cup of his raging fury. Once again, Revelation 16, 17 through 19. Comments?
Well, Scott, I don't want to hog all the conversation here, but I'm really skeptical that America is a city. America is really, really big. Okay. I used to live in Los Angeles. That's a really big city. I've been to Mexico City. That's an even bigger city. I've been to New York. That's a big city, right? These are huge cities by any ancient comparison. Our modern cities dwarf the ancient cities. All right. They're just enormous, right? Especially if you take the greater New York City or the greater Los Angeles, right? We're talking huge. But to suggest that the whole country, I mean, some 3,000 miles across and I don't know, 2,000, 2.5, high or whatever, north to south. I don't know. I'm really pretty skeptical of that. I just don't know why a city can't be a city. Granted, a big city, but a whole continent. Why would a continent be a city? I mean, does the word city not mean anything? Call me very skeptical of that.
Scott, would you call me a Yankee?
Pardon?
A Yankee.
Would I call you, or have I?
Would you or have you?
I I generally don't use the term, to be honest with you.
Okay, some people do. And New York Yankees, but Yankees. We were described as Northerners as Yankees. The whole mess of us.
I don't know, man. I mean, sure, I used to live in Michigan. I was a Yankee too. I thought Yankee was just a northern person. Does it mean only New Yorkers? Again, why see, I think what we're falling into is ethnocentrism, right? Where we think that our country is the only country that matters. And of course, we're Americans, and so we all know that our country is the only one that matters, right? But it's not true, right? And I've lived in many countries around the world, and here's something I discovered. I was like, oh my goodness, there are other nice places on this planet. There are other people that actually have good ideas, and it's not only the United States of America. I also discovered there are other countries that have real problems, and we're not the only ones with our problems, right? So to look at America, I think is very ethnocentric. I think it's myopic. I don't think that we're doing ourselves any favors, and it's just short-sighted in my opinion. So, I think we should. Why don't we just let Babylon be Babylon? Here's another thing. So, because people say, well, Babylon wasn't really Babylon. It's actually Rome, right? This is one of those theories. So in 1 Peter chapter 5, where he says that those in Babylon greet you, they're like, well, see, that right there is proof that Peter went to Rome. And I'm like, wait a second. It's not proof that Peter went to Rome. It's proof that Peter went to Babylon. Because what was the third largest Jewish center in the world? Oh, it was Babylon. Okay. The second was Alexandria in Egypt, right? And then of course the first was Jerusalem, right? So you had real Jews living in a real place called Babylon, and so Peter is saying those in Babylon greet you. That's all he's saying. That proves that he went to Babylon. It doesn't prove that he went to Rome. But because people have been very flippant about this, and we can just give Babylon any definition we want to give it, well, then it becomes anything we want it to be. And now it's the entire continent of the United States of America. Why doesn't Canada get any nastiness, right? They're on the same continent that we are. It doesn't quite seem fair. Why should it stop at the borders? Let's give some to Mexico too. But, again, this is where I think we become ethnocentric, and I don't think that we're really looking at it seriously.
Could you divide original Babylon, physical Babylon, in the Medo-Persia area, into three parts like this?
I'm sure God could do it just fine. Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't think it's the great city being Jerusalem. It seems like he's talking about Babylon. So, and also, where's the United Nations?
Well, currently it's in New York City, but again, that is to presume that the United Nations will continue to be the predominant world body. It was the League of Nations up until World War II, right? And then it all switched over. It's not that old. I mean, things can change. I think things are going to change. And again, if we're not in a hurry to get out of here, because we're not pre-tribbers anymore, I think we have more than enough time. Although, to be fair, according to Scott's timetable, we got to be out of here in just a couple of years. So, hey, man, if I'm wrong, you can all throw stones at me. It's fine. I'll get a new body anyway. I won't care. But
I'll be truthful, Doug. Yeah. I bought dinar back in 2010 because I read my Bible and I said, it's going to happen again. We'll have a real physical Babylon. Yeah. I need those dinar. Boy, that was a waste of money.
Live and learn, my friend. Live and learn. Yeah. We're all a little bit smarter now, aren't we? But, again, I just think that Babylon, the place in Iraq, I think that makes the most sense. It's the easiest to interpret. Again, there is a world system that is global, right? It's all over. That the Babylonian system is everywhere, but that but that there's an actual city that God's like, you know what, I'm kind of ticked off at you, literal city, because it was in this very place where it all went to pot, right? It was in that spot where Nimrod made a deal with the devil, so far as I can tell, and he became a Gibor, and then he became the god of the Amorites, right? He was known as Amuru, or he was known as Martu, and all this other stuff that then just went from bad to worse, let's say. And of course, obviously, you had Ishtar and all these other false gods. It all started there. So I see God kind of circling back, right? He's got a personal vendetta with this city. He also seems to have a personal vendetta with Mount Hermon, right? There's a whole entire psalm about that. Psalm 68 talks about, how God is going to reclaim the mountain. And as I recall, Jesus went there to Mount Hermon. He took Peter, James, and John, and the four of them met two other dudes, right? Elijah and Moses, who were glowing on top of that mountain. I think that freaked Satan out. So, we have a historical precedent of where, Jesus, God, right, went to a particular place because that place had historical significance. And I'm making the same case when it comes to Babylon. I think that the actual literal physical geographical place has significance in God's economy, and that city is going to be rebuilt. And I think all of the world stuff is going to move to Babylon. I don't think that the United Nations is going to be significant anymore. Just a little spoiler: if you haven't read Regenesis Code yet, you really should. All right, you can listen to it for free or go to Amazon and get it. But in there, we Mornay, my co-author, and I, we're obviously writing fiction. Okay, so we get to speculate as much as we want, but we're doing our best to keep it tied to the scripture, pretty close. We suggest that that the UN will be disbanded, and that all of the authority that the UN carried will be turned over to Babylon. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think this is where the world's going to get together. They're going to say, you know what, we were all happy in one happy family back in Babylon. Why don't we just go back to that? I think we're going to have some really rich dude who's going to essentially practically buy up the country of Babylon. And then he's going to make that his headquarters. He's going to make it kind of a utopia. He's going to use all kinds of amazing technology, etc., or at least the smoke and mirrors of the technology to make Babylon into this incredible utopia. And, look at what's happening with Nahum, right? You have obviously in Saudi Arabia, they're doing a huge earthworks. It's the biggest earthquake. Well, I don't think so. No,
okay,
my only point is that big things are underway, right? And who would have thought? I mean, to me, it still seems like a crazy idea. But you know what? I'm not the crown prince, and I don't have unlimited funds, So if he wants to build a city that's, I don't know how many hundreds of miles long and, a mile wide, I don't know. It's crazy. But that's his brainchild, and he thinks it's a great idea. Okay, could there be somebody else who has unlimited funds and says, hey, I really think Babylon is a pretty cool place, and I want to invest heavily in this place, and it will take over the world center, right? It will be the focus of the world. I think it's entirely plausible, and I think we have enough time for all this to happen, so long as we're not pre-tribbers.
Saudi Arabia is investing in tech, AI specifically, and they could place it anywhere. They could set up data centers in Babylon, per se. And it may not be a city, but it would be a tech city.
Yes.
And,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, somebody mentioned Elon Musk. Look, I don't know if Elon Musk is going to be the Antichrist. I really don't. But if it were somebody like him, that would not surprise me, right? We have these multi-billionaires, right? This is kind of a whole new idea that you have people with just practically unlimited funds. Jeff Bezos, again, I'm not saying he's the Antichrist, but somebody like that. that seems to have unlimited funds. They've built the ultimate money machine, and now for fun, they can have billion-dollar yachts. They can have their own space company, the rocket company to go up in space when they feel like it. And maybe we'll go to Mars, or maybe I don't know, maybe we'll rebuild Babylon. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people can decide to do with their money, and they get to do it because it's their money. Whether they got it fair and square or not is another question, but they get to do what they want. And that's the kind of person. They're saying that it's not going to be long until we have the world's first trillionaire. That's something that Mornay and I speculated about in
Taylor
Genesis
Swift, huh?
With Taylor Swift. She's got a ways. She's rich, but she's got a ways to go before she's a trillionaire. But but it would not surprise me that you have one man who could have more money than like 10 or 20 countries combined. That's just insane, right? And then you think about it. Here's what I would also suggest is that Iraq, I think, really needs a huge investment. And so if you had a person come along and say, hey, you know what, I will, bankroll everything, and suddenly their economy gets going. This is exciting. Like, wow. Again, I just think we have to think outside the box a little bit. And that's what writing fiction did for me, as I got to think outside the box. I wasn't stuck to the felt board. I wasn't stuck to the to the graphs and the tables and like, no, this is all we can have. This is our chart, and this is how it's going to happen. I'm like, how do I actually connect these pieces? And once I just had a tiny bit of fiction in my end time scenario, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can see so many possibilities. But there actually being a literal city, it just made the most sense to me. And yeah, and so then I think God is going to destroy that city when it all comes down. That city may have water coming into it. They might build a new canal. They're talking about building some competition to the Suez Canal because they really need it, right? So again, I just think that we're thinking like, 19th century, 20th century kind of stuff. And we're in a whole new century. We have all kinds of new tech that can do some pretty radical stuff, which on its face, I think is beautiful and brilliant and wonderful. But I think it can all be used in a way that might, work into the hands of the enemy, all said and done.
Okay. Scott, anything?
Not much.
Okay. And so there is the woman also. So, Doug, if you can flip me back to the view again.
Of course. Yeah.
Why do we study the woman in Revelation? And
Oops.
Once again, this is Joe DeMont. Okay. Yeah, we'll get to
Yeah.
that later on too.
Yes.
And so really Babylon is spoken about not that much. I mean, there are veiled references. I think you mentioned Isaiah 14, and maybe you could argue a few other, there's some other Isaiah chapters. But really 8 or more chapters. That's about it. Revelation 17, 18, Jeremiah 50 and 51, and then Isaiah 13, 14, 47, and 21. That's about it. That's about it for Babylon. But it is intriguing, and I think it's worth studying for those that are interested. And once again, I'm citing Joe DeMond for this slide. And then this is Revelation 18 about the suddenness. And we'll get to this when Doug just showed the slide of Jeremiah 51, 1 through 3. And Doug will show the Hebrew and explain that to you later on. But the main thing is there's this suddenness in it. She has fallen. She has fallen. Babel the Great. She has become a home for demons, a prison for every unclean spirit, a prison for every unclean, hated bird, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of God's fury caused by her whoring. Yes, the kings of the earth went whoring after her or with her. And from her unrestrained love of luxury, the world's businessmen have grown rich. And once again, I'm not dogmatic that this has to be New York or the United States, but it sounds like it. I mean, it does. The world's business people have grown rich off New York City and the United States, off the Yankees, you could argue. So would she fall fast? Well, somebody was asked once, how did you go bankrupt? And he said, well, kind of slow at first, and then it was really fast. And so things, when they fall, they tend to fall fast. Doug, comments? Scott?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great way to look at it. That it's kind of a slow thing, and then it can happen quickly. Um, I don't know. What I would suggest is that we're going to have Babylon. I don't know for how many years we're going to have Babylon around, but it will seem like it is the center. It is the epicenter of all of the world's trade, and I think it actually will be. I think this really could be a place where the East meets West, very literally. It could be someplace that's kind of neutral, like it's not America, it's not China, it's not Russia. It's this place that none of us are. Well, we're all kind of vested in because they have some oil and stuff, but none of us are terribly vested in it. And, so this could be a new place. I think, quite frankly, people are tired of coming to America. I think, the Chinese and the Russians and all these various delegates are tired of coming to New York City. Why should they come here? So Babylon, I think, is going to fall, though. I think it's going to fall very, very quickly. Right? It says it's going to fall in 1 hour. And that's one of the reasons that I keep going back to a literal city. Because if we look at, and this is why I think Babylon has to be rebuilt, because the Babylon in Iraq did not fall in 1 hour. It fell very fast. Slowly. Well,
in terms of
it wasn't destroyed. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
in terms of its leadership, yes, the leadership fell very quickly.
Right.
Okay. But in terms of the city itself, that didn't really happen at all. It just kind of crumbled. It fell apart in the very most literal sense of the word. It fell apart until now it's dust. But again, if God is really adamant that he's going to destroy this city because he's really mad at it, I don't know. Then it sounds like he's got to have a city to destroy, So I don't know. That's my take.
Anything, Scott?
No, I just see Babylon as being more of a spiritual component and whose tentacles reach all over the world. And New York City would certainly qualify. So would Rome. So would London. So would Jerusalem, so would Mecca. I mean, that's sort of how I look at the Babylon component of this compared to the Roman component, the political component. And they're all in bed together. So that's just how I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. They are very much in bed together, And so I don't think any of us is contesting that the Babylonian system is all over the world. I think we're just discussing, where is Babylon the Great as a local place, right? As a literal place. I just think New York City fails. I mean, there's lots of wonderful people in New York City. There's lots of great stuff that happens in New York City. As much as there's bad stuff that happens, we can also say there's a lot of great stuff that happens in New York City. A lot of redemption has come from the city of New York.
Wilkerson, Times Square Church. Yes, you're right. There's been great faith in New York City.
Yeah. So this is where I think, again, we become very myopic, that we start just looking at one facet of New York. Well, it's right on the water, so therefore it must be. And New York is obviously still very, very important, but I think the power is shifting. I don't think that it is what it used to be, say 20, 30 years ago. I think the prominence of New York City is fading from what I can see, and other cities are very much taking up the slack. Dubai is crazy. They got the biggest buildings. They have tons of money. There's a lot of business that's happening over there. Singapore, right? That's another place. It's just huge. Hong Kong, right? So there's your actual city state.
They're tied in with China. China has
I know,
issues.
But still, Hong Kong is a major, major player, right?
Oh, yeah.
So obviously Beijing and other places are becoming big players. And I think we're going to have a shift of power. This is where I think we're being ethnocentric to suggest that it has to be somewhere here in America, and even all of the continent of the United States of America. I just think that the power is shifting. And I think when we look back in 20, 30 years, we're like, yeah, that was kind of a, remember back when the barcodes came out? I remember that. I mean, oh my gosh, this is it, man. This is crazy. The barcode, I can see it, 666, I'm like, oh, wow. I thought I was going to get raptured any day, you know. And I look back and I'm like, oh, foolish Doug, you know, because but that's how it seemed to really fit, right? And I could see the numbers right there. Just look at those two parallel lines, man. That's a 6 right there, and you see it on every product in the whole world, right? And that just had to be it. But now I'm like, I was so foolish, right? You know, and so this is where, you know, remember your first year in college, you're a freshman, you're like, I don't know anything. Your second year of college, you're a sophomore, you know everything, right? Sophomore means a wise fool, right? And then by your third year, you're like, you know, I don't really know that much, come to think of it, right? And this is where I think we have these little things in eschatology. You know, we first come into it like, I don't know anything about eschatology. Then we're in it for a little bit, like, man, I know everything about eschatology, and I'm going to tell everybody that I know everything. And then after a little bit of seasoning, you're like, you know, there's a whole lot I just don't know. And you know, this is why, you know, it's fun to look at the scriptures, and obviously God gave us a lot of scriptures. But when we start getting too close to the newspaper, then we're going to run into problems. That's why personally I like to take a much broader scope on things. I like to really look at the history as much as I can, and to get just a broader view, so that, you know, I don't kind of do the sophomore thing and like, well, this thing has to be it, right? The same thing happens with Torah. We get the Torah terrorists, you know, the first year they're in it, they don't know anything. But by year 2, man, they know everything. And they come and they tell me that they know everything. And I'm not even keeping Torah if I'm not doing it the way they've been told to do it, you know? And then after a while, they come back, you know, after 5 years or something. They're like, you know, I kind of left. I was kind of a jerk, you know, kind of a Torah terrorist. I'm sorry about that. I'm like, yeah, I know you were. You know, but hey, praise the Lord, you know, because you know what? God is patient with all of us. And so this is just where, you know, we can have our theories, but I do not think that New York City or America really fits the bill. And I think we're going to have egg on our face if we keep pressing that whole idea.
So there is a spiritual Babylon, and that could be someplace, but how could we come out of spiritual Babylon?
Well, again, I don't think that spiritual Babylon is a place, just to be clear, right? I would say that there's a spirit, okay? You know, just like you might go, I don't know, you might feel the spirit of New York City, or you might feel the spirit of California, or, you know, or St. Louis, right? Or Minneapolis, right? Like, just got a nice spirit about it, right? I think there's an air, there's a sense, there's just this thing. Now, it could be an actual spirit, right? Okay. That is kind of operating in this world. And I would dare say that there is an actual spirit. We see this woman that rides the beast, so clearly articulated in the ancient world. It's Inanna, the queen of heaven. She becomes Ishtar in the Akkadian expression of that. Then, you know, Ashtoreth and Astarte, Venus, right? And so she is this young woman. She's very cosmopolitan. She's also a warrior. She's always available, you know, but never becomes a mother. She's kind of anything you want her to be. She's any pleasure you can possibly imagine, whether it's power or sex or fame, you know, or riches. She'll be anything you want. And is that spirit of Babylon alive and well? Yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. And, you know, this is where God is, I think, calling us not so much physically out of a location, but out of a lifestyle, you know, out of a sense of, well, let's just call it greed. Okay. I mean, that's probably one of the best words to describe Babylon is greed for anything, or coveting, right? That's probably the number one sin that, that Babylon entails is coveting, right? I want something that's not mine. I want what you have, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get that. So, you know, I think God is really calling us out of that sense of greed and coveting and not being satisfied with the things that God's given us, etc. And so he's calling us out of that particular mindset and that lifestyle.
Rome, USA, and all others are daughters of the mother of harlots. This includes religious and political systems. Thank you, prodigal son returned.
That
What do
just
you think?
that sums up my understanding of it. I don't think it has to be a literal city in the end. So that's where Doug and I would differ.
Okay, interesting. And the word in the Greek for harlots would be porn, porneus, one of those forms of porn. Uh, I I can tell you that L.A. seems to be the porn capital. I mean, if people are looking for filming and other activities, that seems to be the city that is the porn center.
I mean, yeah, there's obviously a lot of porn there. It's from porne, which is a prostitute. Again, where do we first find this prostitute, right? We first find the prostitute in the city of Babylon, right? And that she's exported from there. Clearly, goes all over the world to Los Angeles and many other places. But we actually find Ishtar as the mother of harlots. I mean, that was one of her titles,
Oh,
right? So, you know, and she was a naked woman who was riding a beast, right? That's what's so crazy about it, right? So we don't have to look far afield to find a woman riding a beast, right? She's right there, she's right there. She's a woman riding a beast, and there you go, right? So that's why I would go back to the actual city. Again, I do think that there is a very much a spiritual component. So Scott and I agree in that. But when it comes to chapter 17 of Revelation, where it does talk about chapter 18, excuse me, where it talks about a literal city, that's where I would suggest that the literal city that's being spoken of there and in Jeremiah chapter 51 is speaking of the city that is in Iraq. We would call Babylon, okay, where Nebuchadnezzar used to live, and obviously those in the old Babylonian kingdom that was established by Nimrod, right? Now, why is this place so significant? Well, who established it? Nimrod, Mr. Let's Rebel, Nimrod, right? So his three root letters, Mem, Resh, Dalet, means Marad. It means to rebel. Right now, I highly doubt that Cush, his father, said, "I'm going to name this one Nimrod. Let's rebel." It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Every father wants their kid to try to do a little better than they did, but no, I'm going to name this one Miss Little Rebel. I just don't. It doesn't make any sense. So I think what the Bible is doing for us is telling us, this particular individual, Cush's son, yeah, he was named something else, but it doesn't matter. You know him as the rebel. Now, the ancient world knew Nimrod as Nin Urta. Okay, Nin is the same as Inanna, right? The queen of heaven, or the Lord of heaven, Lordess, right? Okay. The queen. So Nin Urta, okay, Nin means Lord. And for those of you Hebrew speakers out there, Urta sounds like what? Sounds like Eretz. And I was thinking about this the other day because in Dutch, it's, I want to forget, but I think that Eretz and earth are exactly the same word. Kind of weird, huh? So Urta, earth, whatever, Lord of the earth, right? He was the Lord of the earth. And I think the Bible's saying, no, you weren't. Okay. You weren't the Lord of the earth. You just think you were. You're the rebel. And so from there, from Marad, what else do we get? We get Marduk. We get Martu. Oh, let's keep going into Latin, shall we? We get Mars, or Martes, right? So the god Mars. Mars is not a Latin word. It actually comes from ancient Akkadian, which is coming from, right, Ninurta. So all of these things point back to this Lord of the earth who established and founded Babel. Right? That's what's so crazy. And what were they doing at Babel? They were trying to create a gateway of the gods. Now, another thing to consider is, could there be what some people call ley lines, or kind of, divine geometry or geography or whatever, however you want to think about that there could be actual places on the earth where the curtain, the cosmic curtain, the veil, the shield between here and there is maybe thinner, or there's something about that place that would allow some kind of wormhole or portal to open up to some degree easier? I think it's likely. Okay, I think Mount Hermon was one of those places where it was easier to break through the veil. I think Babel was one of those places. I think there's a reason that they were trying to establish this gateway of the gods in that place, because there was something about it, right? There was just something about that place. I can't tell you what. I don't know if we have any scientific instruments to measure such a thing, but I think there was something about that particular place on this planet where the gateway was easier to build there than to build somewhere else. And so, when we think about what's going to happen in the end, there's a lot of crazy stuff that's going to be happening. We're going to have, what does it say in Revelation, right? That the river Euphrates is going to dry up to make way for the kings of the east, right? It's actually suggested, they've actually uncovered the tomb of Gilgamesh. Guess where it was? It was under the Euphrates River, right? And now that things are kind of drying up, they were able to find this thing, right? So they actually did find the tomb of Gilgamesh. We don't know what they found inside of it. They didn't. I don't think they've told us, to my knowledge.
Who's doing that dig? About that. Who's doing that dig? Do you know? Was it Arabs or Semitic people?
It was a German.
Germans. Okay.
It's in my book. It's in.
Why are they always involved in this? Why?
Well, the Germans are just really.
They're curious.
Yeah, they're good students. They're very good students. And so they put out a lot of good archaeologists and biblicists and Sumerologists and Akkadians. So all of these is what they do. So that's just one of the things they do. And so they found this, right? It's quite astounding. So I think that there could be a very practical, spiritual, geographic reason that they have to go back to Babylon, because there's something, let's call it sacred, about that area.
Is there a prince of Persia in that area?
Well, I would suggest that there might be one step better. Maybe there is a prince of Babylon, or is a king of Babylon, per like Isaiah chapter 14, right? That just might want his stomping ground back. Maybe he's like, hey, I like this area. This is where I operate, and this is what I'm going to do. So, again, remember Isaiah 14 is talking about the king of Babylon, which we know is Satan. Maybe he's kind of beholden to that area. Maybe there's something special. Maybe he has an edge if he sets up camp in Babylon versus New York City versus, Singapore or some other place. There's something special about that. And if what you're saying is that, by taking the gates of Babylon to Germany, that there was a curse that was brought upon that country, which I think you could be right. Maybe there's some power that's actually in the place called Babylon. Maybe Raiders of the Lost Ark isn't quite so wrong after all. I don't know. That there could be something about these relics or these places. We don't know. Right? We're kind of in the dark on a lot of this stuff. Maybe there is something about Stonehenge that that place is very significant, right? I don't know.
There are these monuments all over the world. And we don't really know who the Prince of Greece is or the Prince of Persia. There's no names attached. So, Scott, did you have a comment, Scott?
No, I like Lisa's comment. Doug is wrong. So
I wish you would give her a reason. I talk to Lisa every now and then, and I don't know why she said he was wrong.
It was short, sweet, and to the point.
Okay. You know what? I could be wrong. There's no doubt about it. I very much could be wrong. But there's a chance I could be right. So we'll have to wait and see.
Next slide.
That's fine.
Okay. So we're going to be contrasting Revelation 18:21 with Jeremiah 51:63. Then a mighty angel took up a stone, like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found anymore. And you would argue, really, Babylon isn't found anymore, But now that's Revelation 18:21. But Jeremiah 51:63. Now it shall be when you have finished reading this book that you shall tie a stone to it and throw it into the Euphrates. Then you shall say, thus Babylon shall sink and not rise from the catastrophe that I will bring upon her, and they shall be weary. Comments? Stone. Threw it into the sea or the Euphrates. Sea is different. It's Yam. Well, no, that's Revelation 18. I'm blanking on the C word for Greek. But anyway, Babylon, sink and shall not. And it seems to match, guys.
Thalassa is the Greek word for sea.
Oh, you're right. Well, no, there's two words actually. I'll show you later on.
Deal. Again, I think when the obvious sense makes sense, then seek no other sense, and I just don't know why we would need to work so hard to make Babylon something other. When it's talking about a city, okay, not talking about the spirit of Babylon and all that stuff, right? I'm tracking with you. But insofar as an actual city that's built, that there are people there, there's commerce there, the city is going to be literally destroyed. Again, I think it's kind of like Hollywood. What is Hollywood? Is it a spirit or is it a place? You tell me, right? Well, I've been to Hollywood, and I'm like, okay, so this is Hollywood, But clearly, the influence of Hollywood far exceeds that little city in California, right? It's a worldwide phenomenon that we know as Hollywood. We often talk about Hollywood, not thinking of that place in California, but we think of it as an industry. We think of it as, a system that, people churn out movies, and there's entertainment, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. There's a lot of greed. There's a lot of weirdness. There's, all kinds of funky things that happen within the Hollywood system. You might be making a movie in South Africa, but it's part of Hollywood, so to speak, right? So that's what I would suggest when it comes to Babylon, that, there's this whole Babylonian system that far surpasses the actual city. It goes all over. But there is an actual city, and I think there's one that's going to be rebuilt. So I just think keep it simple.
Okay, and then there's some other verses that were cited, Isaiah 13, Isaiah 21, and so I'll just run through them fairly quickly. Thus Babel, that jewel of kingdoms, with the pride and glory of Kasdim. So I don't know how you translate Kasdim, but
Chaldees.
Chaldees, and they're the mystics. Okay, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah. When overthrown by God, it will never again be inhabited. And technically, right now, it hasn't been. Then, as they appeared, the cavalry horsemen in pairs, he spoke these words: She has fallen, Babel. All the carved images of her gods lie shattered on the ground. That's Isaiah 21:9. And then to finish it out with Isaiah 47:1. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground, not on a throne, daughter of the Kasdim. There's Kasdim again. No longer are you to be called dainty and delicate. So you would argue, I think similar to me, that when you see Kasdim, you're seeing the mystics. You're seeing that region was known for mystics. Daniel communed with the mystics of that time frame.
Yeah, but I also think it's pinpointing it to an actual geographic location.
Okay.
Kasdim is almost universally translated as Chaldees.
Right.
They were a people in a very specific geographic location. Yes, they did engage in mystic arts, no doubt about that. But I don't know what else you got, because I think Isaiah 47 is exactly parallel to what you have in Revelation 17. They're one and the same.
Okay, so I'll go through a little bit of Jeremiah. Then I think what we should probably do is run on to Jeremiah early in 51 and just kind of cover that. So I set a trap and caught you, Babel. Before you knew it, You were discovered and seized because you challenged Adonai. Adonai has opened his store of arms and brought out weapons of his wrath. For Adonai Elohei Tazvot has work to do in the land of Kasdim. Attack her from every direction, open her stores of grain, pile her up like heaps of grain, destroy her completely, leave nothing. That's Jeremiah 50. And then against Babel and those living in Lev Kamai, I will, this is Jeremiah 51. Okay, we'll cover this later on. I'll move on to the next one because I want Doug to handle it in the Hebrew. You guys will see something interesting. Okay, so an agonized cry is heard from Babel, great destruction in the land of Kasdim, for Adonai is plundering Babel and silencing her noisy din. Their waves, there's the waves again, roar like a raging ocean. Their clamor sounds and resounds. That's Jeremiah late in 51 there. And then we've seen some of these things, the split parts again. Babel is listed in 14 here. She made the nations drink of her wine. I want to get to, okay, so this is Dimitri Duduman, and I've been trying to get Michael Bolday on the show. He claims that as he was tortured and bringing Bibles into these communist nations years ago, that he was told that America is Mystery Babylon. And he was told to cite, because he said, God, I can't just walk up to people and say, America is Babylon without verses. And he said, read Jeremiah, I want to say 51, probably 8 through 14, something like that. We aren't going to cover those verses as much. I would recommend that you read those verses, but tell them because the nations of the world immigrated to America with their own gods and were not stopped, encouraged by the freedom here. The wickedness began to increase. Later on, even though America was established as a Christian nation, the American people began to follow the strange gods that immigrants had brought in and also turned their backs on the God who had built and prospered the country. Not everybody agrees with Dimitri Duduman, but, and once again, here's more of the verses from Joe Dumond. The verses are intriguing, and they just keep on going on. So Babylon has military power. You can see the hammer of the earth. Very interesting with Jeremiah 50:23. The United States is the hammer of the earth still, even though you're right. China and Russia are vying with us right now, but we're still the hammer. We are. And the battle axe. So you can see that in both sections of Jeremiah 50. And so, Joe Dumond is asking who's the leader in the world's weapons. It seems to be us right now, although that could change. You're right. All the nations do flow to us. So our government authority, they all look to us. So that's 51:44. So, and then this will be pretty much the end here, I think, of the verses. So this is comparing the water aspects. Now, keep in mind, Doug and I were talking about thalassa, and that is the Greek word for water or seas and things like that. The problem is that we can't always draw exactly what God is meaning by that, and I'll show you in Revelation 17 how that works. Mm-hmm. Okay, so first we'll do Jeremiah 51, and we'll show you the water part. Raise a standard against the walls of Babel, strengthen the guard, post the sentries, prepare ambushes, for Adonai has both planned and accomplished what he promised to do to those living in Babel. You who live near plenty of water, and that's Ma'im in the Hebrew, so rich in treasure, your end has come, your time is for being cut off. So that's Jeremiah 51:12 and 13. When you get to Revelation, in 17, it starts out right away in 1 and 2, describing this whore sitting by many waters. But then it drives people like me crazy, because by verse 15, it says the waters where the whore is sitting are peoples, crowds, nations, and languages. So I'll just read one more time, verse 1 and 2. Then came one of the angels with the 7 bowls. He said to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great whore who is sitting by many waters. And I think that's Hadassah. I can't remember, Doug, if it's thalassa or Hadassah. It's one or the other. So anyway, okay. And I wish I could say specifically, well, that means that when he's talking about thalassa, it's seas, and when he's talking about Hadassah, it's water. But anyway, the kings of the earth went whoring with her, and the people living on the earth who have become drunk from the wine of her whoring. Okay, so what you should see is water somehow, and it does match up. It's just that God is specifically telling us, don't think that water is just water. It can be peoples, crowds, nations, and languages. And there are more people in Asia than in America.
That's part of the challenge. I mean, I wish it were always a one-for-one equivalency in Scripture. That would make interpretation much easier. But I think the next best thing is to get as many passages as we can that are all saying a very similar kind of thing, and then we can compare and contrast those. And it doesn't always give us 100% accuracy, at least not if we take the humble road, I think. But we can at least come up with a pretty solid interpretation. Say, well, based on this verse, this verse, this verse, and this verse, right? Then I think that we can go back and take a look at. I mean, when you were quoting from Jeremiah 51, it said Bel in Babylon, right? God's going to judge Bel in Babylon. So I was like, okay, we're kind of ignoring that because this Dumitri or whatever his name is,
Dumitru.
that he's trying to say that America is Babylon. Again, I just think like, well, the text actually tells me that he's going to judge Bel, who is Baal, in Babylon, right? So why not just start there? Okay, again, is America part of the problem? Yes, you'll never hear me disagree with that, right? I think America is very much a major part of the problem, right? We might be front and center, but that still doesn't make us Babylon. It just makes us the worst daughter of Babylon. Out of all our kids, we're the worst and we're going to get judged. Yes, I agree, but it doesn't make us Babylon. And I think God's vendetta is against the spirit of Babylon, and I think it's against the city of Babylon. And again, things can change, guys. Things can change quickly. I hate to admit it, but I do believe the American empire is just about over. I think we're enjoying the last gasps of the American empire. I hope that, it continues until, I'm out of here. I'll say that very selfishly, right? Nobody wants to see the death of an empire, but I think we are getting close to that. And I think they're going to have a major shift in power for a whole host of reasons, but I think we're going to have a shift in power. And the weapons of today may not be the best weapons of tomorrow, right? These things can shift quickly, right? We saw that certainly in World War I. We saw it in World War II, that innovation drives new weapons, right? And when there's a need, when there's like, hey, we've got to figure out a way to do this, I think it can change very, very quickly. Even within the war between Russia and Ukraine, we've seen the drone take a whole different aspect to this, So I just don't think we've seen the end of it. I think those people who are getting these prophecies about America being Babylon, I think they're mistaken. They might have great intentions, but I think they're ultimately mistaken about it. Should we as Americans take note? Yes. Should we maybe change our ways? Probably. Should we come back to the Lord? Absolutely. Okay. But still, we don't have to be Babylon for those things to have some relevance to us and some application without it actually being, we are the city, we don't have to be the city of Babylon. I just think there's too many things that do not add up. We have to ignore too many things. And then we're just kind of making up what we want to make up.
Can you pull up Jeremiah 51, 1-3, please?
Absolutely. All right.
Let's start it out with verse 1, and then verse 3 is the big one, people. So move it. There it is. So thus says the Lord.
Sorry.
Whoop.
Yeah.
There it is. Behold, I will raise up against Babylon, against those who dwell in the heart of Kamai. Doug, do you have a comment on where the heart of Kamai would be?
I don't. No, I don't. That's why it's been left not translated. Because
guys, this is the tough part, figuring out what things actually mean, especially prophetically. So, okay. So it's Lev Kamai. It's the heart of Kamai, whatever that means. A destroying wind. So that's Ruach Mashkit. And that's an interesting phrase too. Mashkit is not used very often in the Bible, and it is a destruction, destroying. It's very severe. It's used in Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, things like that. The nasty times. Okay. And I will send winnowers to Babylon. They shall winnow her and empty her land for the day of doom they shall be against her all around. And this is where it gets interesting, people, and why you need Doug involved in this, because it's let's see, Yudrok, Haderek. Okay, so now they're going to say it's archers, bend his bow. And Scott, yes, your favorite word, taxon, is in there in the Septuagint. And that is the same word used for the bow in Revelation 6 verses probably 2. And so it's very, very interesting how, that's the first seal, it's the bow. And in this case, how I interpret this is that whenever Babylon falls, whatever it happens to be, it falls incredibly fast, so fast that the archers can't even get their bow bent, because literally in 1 hour, in the Greek, it would be hora from Revelation 17 and 18, but and lift himself against her in his armor, do not spare her young men, utterly destroy all her army. So whatever Babylon happens to be, it's in a hora, an hour, and it is Yidrok, Haderek. And I think they're probably right. Okay, so Doug and I will confer about this, but my opinion is when you take a word and duplicate it in the Hebrew, it's for emphasis. It's like, an exclamation point. But when you put 3 in there, that means you need to notice this. And also, yes, no, not everybody knows the Masoretic marks, but the second Yidrok has no Masoretic marks. Doug, your comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as a cray and a kativ kind of thing. So cray is what you're supposed to read, and kativ is what is written. So, I would be curious if there could be some kind of a textual issue here. I'm not sure. But yeah, Yidroch Hadoech, this is probably, the use of the impair, or the not the infinitive, but the I'm trying to think of the word here, but this is the infinitive absolute that's being used, right? So basically you have this word plus another one, Hadoech, so there's some kind of emphasis that is being added.
Thank you.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah, and the word itself just means, it's the word is derech, right? It's the word
derech
for
is
way,
walkway,
a road,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
when we say we're part of the Way congregation, have you ever heard of that? That would be the derech.
That's right, Haderech. And I didn't name it that because I didn't want to hear people butcher the name all the time. What's it called? Haderech? And I'm like, no, it's Haderech. But whatever. So yeah, so this, I was just kind of taking a look at this. Like if we look at the New English translation, do not give her archers time to string their bows or to put on their coats of armor. And look at the footnote here. That tells you something, right? Like this, there's something going on in this text that's complicated, to say the least, right? So not to say that they got it wrong. I think they did a great job. It's not easy, but it's just not easy, right? That's part of it. This is not necessarily an easy text to deal with. But yeah, something radical is going to happen to Babylon. It's going to happen quickly. And when it does, boy, look out. It's going to happen that suddenly. If you don't have time to thread your bow or whatever you do, I'm not an archer, but to get ready, that's how fast this thing's going to fall. So once again, I think that this shows us how, shows us the rapidity of the destruction of Babylon that is yet coming, because God has a vendetta against the city. So, and ultimately it's Satan's city, right? I mean, that's ultimately Satan's doing, right? There's all judgment against the human aspect of but ultimately Satan is the king of Babylon, right? He's the one that God is ultimately battling at the second coming, right? It's ultimately Satan's agenda during the tribulation, and many of the things that happen are because Satan is pulling his switches, and then God is acting or reacting, depending on how you want to look at that. But there's this cosmic battle going on between these two. So, for all of America's problems, we also have done a lot of great stuff. And we can point to any country in the world. Why don't we pick on France? Why should America be Babylon? Why not France? I mean, they got a lot of garbage happening over there, right? A lot of weird stuff and a lot of perverted stuff. I mean, why here? Why not Holland? They've got even a red light district. I mean, why should America be the only place? I know we're the financial center, but again, it can change very quickly. Before World War II, we were not the epicenter of the world. It was Great Britain, Germany to some extent, certain more World War I there. But the power shifted, and it shifted quickly. And I think it's going to shift again. I think America, while we will not disappear, but I don't think we will be the superpower that we are today. I think it's going to shift. My guess, geez, I hope I'm wrong, but within the next 20 years would not surprise me. All right, so don't quote me on that one. But unless I'm right, yeah, then you can quote me. But otherwise, I say that with fear and trepidation, but it would not surprise me if our hegemony does not change. And something that could really change things is the price of oil, right? Or the influence of oil, right. Whatever happens to it, the influence of oil. And how is oil bought nowadays? Well, it's bought with dollars, US dollars. Okay. And that's one reason that we've had so much power, is that because of the petrodollar, right? So long as people need oil, and it looks like they're going to keep needing it, and it's bought in dollars, and they're going to keep needing our dollars, then there will always be a market for the dollar. Now, people have been banging on this drum for quite a while that, that's all going to come crashing down. And I think it will eventually. I don't know when, but I do believe that one of these days, the US dollar is going to crash. People will no longer want to do business in US dollars. For the moment, it's still the best option out there. But again, it could all change. And when it does change and we find some other currency that makes us all happier, and then people are buying oil with that financial instrument, and they're doing contracts in that financial instrument, then all of those dollars that are all over the world are going to come flooding back to the United States. And guess what happens? The value of our dollar will just absolutely plummet. And, we'll have so many dollars chasing so few goods that we'll be done. We don't need actually a war to
Weimar, Germany.
Ruin us. Exactly.
You've seen it.
Yeah. And the days of warm beer, when you just got too many bills chasing too few goods, and you got to get paid like now, because the value is going to lose like half by the end of the day, and obviously it won't happen with paper currency. It'll be digital, but still it could crash quite quickly, and that would be the end of the US empire very quickly. But that doesn't mean that we're Babylon. It just means that maybe our day in the sun is over, and it's going to be time for Babylon to rise up. I don't know, just my thought. Oh, this has been awesome.
Okay.
All right. Well, we better end, because I think Scott's about to fall asleep.
Our wounded warrior.
Thank you, brother Scott. We're so glad you're here, man. We really appreciate it. But Joel, this was fun. This was Joel's idea, and I think it was a fantastic idea. I really enjoyed it. I hope everybody else did as well. So, Joel, thank you for putting all of that together. You did some great research, and it was really fun to be in the hot seat. So we'll do it again. Yeah. Everyone, thank you for joining us. We're so glad that you did. Hey, if you want to be a producer of this show, go over to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. Did you know for like $5 a month, it'll make a huge difference, right? So if everybody joined in, man, it'd be awesome. That would keep the lights on for a very long time. So just consider that. We are working on Regenesis Code. If you haven't read it, I put it for free on YouTube. Now, somebody said, Doug, you should never give your book away. I'm like, yeah, but this one's different. I want you guys to read it, to enjoy it, because I'm doing this for a reason, okay? So I'm not just being completely altruistic. My reason is I want you to enjoy the story, and I want you to pray with me, because I want this to become like a Netflix series or something like Netflix, right? Whether it's, Angel Studios or whoever, but this is a story, right? All the things that we talk about here on Prophecy Roundtable, right? We're talking ultimately about the kingdom of God. And so we want a way to get the kingdom of God message in front of people in a way that is culturally relevant, that where people are. Where are people? They're in front of their screens. Okay, so let's get the message. And what do people like the most? Stories, movies, right? That's what they watch. And so let's do that. And the first book of Regenesis Code, we got 3 more in the works. It's all going to be so that we can get this kingdom message in front of people. My co-author and I, we talk every week, and I know it doesn't always look like it, but we're working hard behind the scenes. We're creating a short, which is going to be just kind of a like a 10-minute, 12-minute short video giving you the concept of what we're trying to do. And we want studios to see what we're trying to do. So they're like, yeah, let's do this thing and let's make a TV series so that we can get this in front of hundreds of millions of people. I was looking up how much an average Billy Graham crusade costs. It was about $2.3 million. And that's a lot of money. Obviously, some people got saved, and I think that's awesome. And the message of the kingdom of God got out. That's great. But we have new tools nowadays. And I think doing it through media is one of the best tools that we can do. And we could potentially reach hundreds of millions, maybe even more. Maybe my faith isn't big enough. I don't know. But I'm asking you to pray with me. Pray with me on this so that we can do something that hasn't been done before. We're not in competition with other people. You know, there are other great Bible teachers out there and prophecy teachers. Hallelujah. And God is using all of us to do his work. So if you want to join with me, please consider that. Definitely pray with me. And until next time.